Hello guys, my name is Sergey, I'm a freediving instructor trainer, and today for the very first time I'm going to do an interview with another freediving instructor here on this channel. His name is Jani Valdivia, and a part of being a good freediver, experienced freediver, he is also a medical professional, and this is what I think making this interview is very interesting. Before we start this interview, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, click the subscribe button now. And there is also a bell button. If you click it, then you're going to receive the notification the next time when I'm going to download my next video. Okay, enjoy the video. Hello one more time. Before we start our talk, can you introduce a little bit yourself? In a few words, can you give us your background both in freediving and what is your professional interest?
Yeah. Thank you, Sergey. Thank you so much. An honor to be with you. My name is Juan Valdivia. In freediving community, known me as Jani or Wani. By training, my practice is neurological surgery, and my freediving is probably my favorite thing to do. Besides that, I am an instructor, and I've been a competitor for a little bit, not for a long time. And yeah, I'd love to compete representing my home country of Peru. I currently live in Tampa, Florida, practicing medicine.
All right. So one more question about you. When you start freediving, you was already medical professional, right?
Yeah, I started freediving. I took my first class when I was assistant professor of neurosurgery in University of Michigan, up north, where it was cold. So I took my first course. I flew to the Bahamas, and I took my first course. And when I took my first course in the Bahamas, I decided that I wanted to be a freediver, and I want to move to Florida to continue freediving. So it changed my life.
So seriously, the freediving is literally changed the place where you're living, and it changed your life, yeah?
Yeah. I just, I realized that it was a very good complement to life in general. I think it's a great compliment for everyone. So I decided in the water that I wanted to move. I wanted to freedive, and that was it. That was my life change.
Amazing story. When you start freediving, you was already like a medical professional. Have you immediately seen that, okay, you as a professional can contribute to the community with your knowledge, or it just came later that like you decide like, okay, I can maybe help a little bit community with your personal knowledge?
You know, freediving is a very interesting pastime sport discipline because, as you can tell, freediving students and freediving from students to elite athletes, a freediving athlete is also a little bit of a scientist as well. Because if you're advancing on your freediving career, you should be able to know a little bit of anatomy, a little bit of physiology, pathophysiology, read some medical literature, even critique the source of your of medical information. So it's different than other sports. And I caught up to that. As soon as I started freediving, I took the course, I saw physiology, anatomy. I said, wow, this is my thing. I like this. I get more interested. And then when I started seeing the competitions and seeing the neurological clinical manifestations of cerebral hypoxia, like LMC, syncope, pre-syncope, blackout, it was an eye-opening new frontier from the neurological part. For me, I said, well, I do this every day for a living. I see neurological changes, and I'm seeing now in my favorite pastime. So yeah, there's a connection right away.
I absolutely agree with you, and despite the fact that I don't have any like a medical background, for me this is a part of freediving which also have a great interest that freediving is a kind of new thing, like relatively still new, and there is a lot of like new studies going on like all the time. So I'm glad to learn every single day, and I'm glad that you ready to share your professional knowledge like with all of us. So I highly appreciate it. So you mentioned such things as LMC and Blackout, and for those viewers who maybe like don't actually remember what it is, can you like shortly explain us maybe one more time what exactly is a LMC, what is exactly blackout, shallow water blackout, just maybe really briefly.
Well, LMC, we popularly know it in freediving as samba, right? Because there's a specific movement and tremor of either one part of the body or multiple muscles in the body. And then blackout is loss of consciousness. If we speak from the from the neurological point of view, samba, when there's no loss of consciousness, can be named as pre-syncope. It's what happens before a syncope, before a loss of consciousness, which, as you know, as you can tell, and yourself and students, it can be the samba or the loss of motor control can be conscious or can be unconscious. I've had samba before where I was fully conscious and I had a very minor tremor, a myoclonic jerk on my upper extremity, and then I fully remember the experience. But then there's episodes where samba evolves into blackout, into loss of consciousness, right? And it all depends on, I believe, the cardiovascular conditioning, hydration status, and the recovery breathing that is effective for that freediver particularly, right? So I think in general terms, LMC or samba is just a threshold of before blackout, before syncope in cerebral hypoxia. And again, blackout and samba, as popularly known in freediving, they're not just the same episode every time for every freediver. There's sambas that are different than sambas, and there's blackouts that are different than blackouts. There are blackouts, right?
The one thing which you mentioned now is like recovery breathing effects as well. And for those again who maybe forgot what is a recovery breathing, it is what are you doing after your breath hold. And there is some kind of debate which is also like always popping up from time to time about the hook breathing. It is when freediver finishing his breath hold attempt, and when he do recovery, he do like a little hold at the end of inhalation. So the freediver inhale and like hold it for a short amount of time, and then do it repeatedly, like for 5-6 times. What is your thought about hook breathing? Does it prevent LMC blackout? What is your personal opinion on this?
Well, I gotta be full disclosure. I'm not an elite diver. My personal best is 60 meters, a little bit over 60, and I'm an instructor humbly, but I can tell you from the neurological point of view, hook breathing. I think if you ask freedivers 5 years, 10 years, maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 years ago, what is the ideal recovery for depth, is hook breathing. They'll mention hook breathing, right? Which theoretically increases your intrathoracic pressure at surface. So you repressurize your alveoli, you reestablish the gradient of gas exchange between alveoli and capillary and blood. So you theoretically are replenishing oxygen delivery, replenishing oxygen and hemoglobin. But nowadays, the more I ask freedivers and friends, and the more I hear that hook breathing may not be the gold standard for everyone. I think maybe the gold standard for recovery breathing is what works for you, right? It's just like freediving is, there's no cookie cutter for everyone. It's what works for you, specifically your case. So nowadays, the more I think about it, the more I think hook breathing is just not one for all. It's just one that may work now, but maybe another type of breathing works for another type of divers. So I do think it helps. In my case, it helped myself. If I had a mild tremor that I thought it was a samba, I did a very forceful hook breathing and I continued conscious. But I cannot tell you that works for everyone. So maybe.
Yeah, I'm again agree on that. I personally, when I learned freediving, when I was doing freediving courses, my instructors told me that this is what you have to do. And this is how I start to do it. And now I think this is just like my habit, which I do it like without like actually thinking about this. But I agree with you that like currently when some freedivers saying that for them maybe hook breathing is not the best. So yeah, maybe it's true that for different freedivers, maybe different recovery protocol is required. I mean, slightly different. Another questions what I want to you like again share your opinion. I have a lot of beginner freedivers, obviously, on my courses, and they sometimes like really scary of like losing the conscious. They saying like oh, hopefully we're not gonna lose the conscious. They're really scary. And on the other hand, I have some experienced freedivers friends who thinking about blackouts as a just like completely regular stuff. Like, yeah, it happens today, maybe next day, maybe next week. So it's like a part of the game. What is your thought? Is a blackout should be part of our freediving game, or it is some kind of like accident which we definitely want to avoid?
I think, as I said, I'm not an elite freediver, but I try to learn from elite freedivers that are acquaintances and friends. I think blackouts and cerebral hypoxia should not be the gold standard to achieve, obviously, in freediving, right? The whole goal of freediving is to enjoy it and do it safely and avoid incidents. Therefore, avoid hypoxia, avoid samba, avoid blackouts. But in competition and pushing the human limits, physiological limits, mental limits, you will be running into incidents where you push the limit and you just cross that threshold of hypoxia and you'll have blackouts. And the whole idea of to do freediving is to do it safely and to be ready to respond. So I don't think having multiple blackouts is making you, is like the goal. You should aim for it. In fact, no, you should aim for the opposite, right? And that's what happens. And having the blackout depends on so many factors, right? Age, cardiovascular conditioning, hydration, hormones, medications, other things, mental. So.
Yeah, agree with this. Agree with this. And Jani, my next question, I heard, and actually I saw that like on the internet, one webinar where you were saying that you created some kind of speciality like related to our subject, related to the blackout and LMC and other emergency. Can you give us a little bit like more insight what it is, what kind of specialty you did?
It's so it's not, it's more something that I designed to teach my students and to teach freedivers who want to learn on how to recognize neurological red flags in freediving. For example, if you are in the middle of nowhere freediving on a boat or on an island, remote island, and there's no medical personnel around, I think for any freediver, all freedivers being very familiar with science to begin with, and with human anatomy and physiology, I think for any freediver to be able to recognize early signs of decompression sickness or neurological problems after dives that have risk for decompression sickness, meaning deep dives, fast rate of ascent, and short recovery interval. To be able to recognize those red flags is important, because the sooner you catch it, the sooner you take that diver to the chamber, the sooner the treatment, the better the outcome, right? If you miss it and you let it go, and then numbness on the hand becomes numbness on the arm, and that's no bueno, no good. So I can show you the exam if I can share the screen with you.
Yes,
Let me see if it works for you. All right, I hope you can see this.
yes.
This is what I teach some students. I just, studying neuroanatomy and neurophysiology at the university and in class is sometimes extremely boring. I mean, it's boring as hell. So I want to make it so that it's entertaining. If you get entertained and excited about neuroanatomy and brain evolution, it's just more fun. So I show these slides about how the the brain evolves, if you believe or not in evolution. When you compare, current human skulls, cranial cavity with other more primitive primates, it's a lot of changes, and there's more changes on the neocortex, which is at the bottom right. The neocortex is the newer area of the brain that we have developed over millions of years that allow us to have rational thought, analysis, logic, control of emotions. And those areas, I believe, play a huge role in freediving, because in freediving, you're trying to control your fear, control emotion, think, and have a spatial orientation. But also in freediving, the bottom left comes into play the mammalian brain, the part of the brain that is less evolved and we share with most mammals. The limbic system that gives us the ability to feel danger, anxiety, fear. So that is something that has to be to some degree controlled in freediving as well. So I tell my students that, or anybody who wants to learn, that if you think of the brain, it's almost like a computer. It's like a much more evolved computer where you do have small units, as a neuron, that connect with other neurons. And there's actually neuroplasticity. The connections in the neurons, contrary to common or old concepts, there's new connections that can be formed over time. That's how you learn. And just like a car, for example, will have specific circuits, the brain also has specific circuits for sensory, for motor, for cranial nerves, for vision, memory, and the senses, right? Every time I think or examine anyone, wherever it's at work or outside work, I have this sort of idea in my mind of the brain, the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system. The brain being the organ that tries to protect itself during mammalian diving reflexes. The brain basically have this innate mechanisms that facilitate vasoconstriction peripherally, blood shift to the core, and the whole purpose of this is to increase your cardiac output, the amount of blood that your heart's pumping, to maintain your cerebral blood flow, because the brain wants to be alive. The brain wants more oxygen, more blood. So the brain is telling your body, I need more oxygen, I need more blood, until you lack compensatory mechanisms. The brain has about 2%, 2 to 5% of body weight, but it uses up to 20% of the oxygen consumption of the whole body. So it uses a lot of oxygen. That's why if you are on the breathe up on the line and you're stressed and wired and you're not relaxed, from personal experience, you will not have a very good diet. So briefly, the idea of doing an exam is it's like you don't have to be, this isn't maybe a bad analogy, but you don't have to be a car mechanic to guesstimate what's wrong with your car. You don't have to be a physician or a neurologist to have some awareness of alarm signs in regards to central nervous system. So this acronym here, mouthfeel CO2, is something that every freediver can remember. You can call it mouthfeel CO2, mask fin CO2, and basically it's an acronym to remember the steps to do a neurological exam in 5 minutes or around 5 minutes. So M is for motor and memory, F is for feeling and fine motor skills, C is for coordination and balance, O for orientation, and 2 for 2 eyes. So in motor exam, you want to test symmetry. You want to make sure the muscles are the same strength, both sides. If you don't want to be that thorough and examine every single muscle, and I guess most free divers know what is deltoid, biceps, triceps, quads, glutes. You can always test gross motor function. You can ask somebody to do a push-up against the wall. You can ask somebody to do a small squat on the floor. And if there's any asymmetry, then that's a red flag. You can ask somebody to do what we call in neurology a pronator drift test. So the diver can lift the hands, raise the hands up, palms up, close the eyes, and if there's any drift of one extremity down and medially, then that's called pronator drift. That's a sign of subtle weakness. Facial asymmetry is huge, especially when it's new. You have to ask if somebody's having a neurological symptom, it has to be new, because if it's chronic, then it's not a big deal. But if it's new, and if it's after a dive, then you have to keep it in the back of your mind that it's maybe a red flag. For memory, you test the diver, you know, the basic things that the diver should be able to remember, like where they're from, what's their birthday, who's their coach. You know, they should be able to remember that 10 minutes after that. For feeling or sensory exam, you basically grab the back of grab the back of a snorkel or the back of the strap of the mask, or even a small piece of paper, and you just graze it against the skin of the face, the extremities, and you want to make sure there's symmetry as well. If there's numbness on one side that was not present before I dive, and now it's new, especially if it's getting worse over time, and that's a red flag as well. For fine motor skills, you ask the diver to do this, how do you call it, this flip-flop movement. So if you see my hands, let's see, you want to make sure, wait, it's here. You want to make sure the hands, you're able to flip-flop really fast. If somebody is not able to do that and is messing on the rhythm, then that's not normal. And you should be able to do this thumb position really fast. If somebody is unable to do that or is messing up with the rhythm and symmetry, that's another red flag. Then for fine motor skills, it's good to ask anyone if they're having problems with typing, brushing their teeth, dressing, eating, texting, and driving, especially texting and let's say even walking. If somebody is telling you after a dive, you know, I'm having issues texting and I'm having issues typing, and that's after a deep dive, etc., then that should be considered some sort of a red flag. Coordination, you do finger to nose, so you ask the divers to touch the tip of their nose and then touch your index, and then keep going back and forth as you move the finger in space. And also heel to toe is to basically walk in a straight line. If somebody's unable to walk in a straight line after, let's say, 10, 15 minutes after a dive, then after a deep dive, I mean, that's usually not okay. I think if you do this test, and this is not scientific knowledge, and I'm not making any statements for any agency, but if you do this test to anyone immediately after a deep dive, I mean, most divers won't be able to pass it because you're usually winded, just trying to ventilate, you're trying to lower your heart rate. But after 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, yeah, most divers should be able to pass a very simple test like this, I believe. Orientation, you ask the diver if they're oriented on place, time, and space, the name, what's the year, where are we, what island we are. And for eyes, you want to make sure you see the pupils, if they're symmetric, and if there's conjugate gaze. You don't need to, this is not for diagnosing stroke or multiple sclerosis. This is very simple, and it's only to recognize red flags. If you recognize red flags early, then it's better. If it's a real case for decompression sickness, even if you catch one case, you can save not only a life, but you could save function. If there's decompression sickness and there's permanent neurological damage, then it could be permanent. And the sooner you catch it, the better. So I hope you like it. It's not, you know, I cannot teach you to do neurology in 10 minutes, but it's a tool. And if you memorize it, I think it could be useful.
So can you stop screening, because I think now we see your screen.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like I personally like highly appreciate what you're doing. I don't know how others gonna like think about this, but like for me personally, because there is almost zero like advices from the medical professionals what to do, then I highly appreciate what you do. Because again, absolutely agree with you that most of the freediving session, if you're talking about the ocean, they are happening in remote places. It's like it's almost universal. If you are training somewhere for the deep diving, more likely you are away from the medical professionals. And I think the ability to kind of test your diver, it's really huge. And again, I want to, like, you correct me if I'm wrong. So how I understanding this your manual, it is for example, if I have a buddy and he finished the dive, and then if there is a sum of the flux which you mentioned, let's say he couldn't touch the nose or something, then for me it is a clear sign that you need to go to the doctor, right? So like it's a kind of alert, like something might be go wrong with you and you need to seek for the medical professionals. Am I correct to
Right.
understand? Yeah.
Yeah, yes. This is not, first of all, again, this is not official statement for any agency, and this is not a replacement for medical evaluation, treatment. This is not a replacement for a doctor or a nurse or anything. But this is for anyone to have some awareness of red flags. So if you find something that doesn't look right, and the diver is telling you that it's new, especially if it's getting worse over time. If it started, let's say, an hour ago, and the same night is worse, either numbness, weakness, inability to walk, double vision, memory problems, speech problems, and yeah, you have to follow that up. You have to ask, how are you feeling? Are you feeling better? How is it going? Are you feeling worse? Okay, maybe it's time for you to look, to seek medical attention. So,
Yeah, I think it's
especially if it's subtle. If you have numbness, sometimes you may not know until you really examine yourself. You know. So
and
anyway, that's
Jani, the question: if someone would like to learn a little bit more about what you were talking about on this presentation, where someone can find you, how to connect with you about this topic. Is it available somewhere, or they need to contact you like somewhere? Like, what is a way?
Uh, uh, Facebook is fine. I mean, yeah, you can. Facebook is easy. You can contact me and ask me questions about it.
Okay,
As I said,
I'm gonna put
if,
your Facebook, I'm gonna put the link to your Facebook account in the description to this video, and then if anyone want to learn, and I hope a lot of people gonna ask you the question about this, then they're gonna contact you, and maybe you can
sure,
explain the way how to learn more about this topic.
sure, yeah. As I said, this is not formal training. This is not replacement for proper medical care, but I think getting to know something new and something that is pertinent to freediving safety is interesting. And I keep learning every time I talk to a freediver. I learn something new myself. So if I can talk to anyone about freediving, it's always a pleasure for me. I'm very humble to learn from everyone and anyone. So thank you so much for giving me a chance to
Really
share.
good attitude, yeah. And Jani, for today I was thinking to talk with you about blackouts, but since you mentioned a few times decompression sickness, do you think maybe on the next time we can talk a little bit more about decompression sickness?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm not a, I have full disclosure. I'm not a hyperbaric. I don't practice hyperbaric medicine.
I get it.
I'm take a hyperbaric course just for knowledge. But yeah, we can talk about decompression sickness, pathophysiology, theories, and neurological manifestations of decompression sickness.
Yeah, because I think it's getting more interesting since I don't know like how you look at it, but previously, let's say, I don't know, 5 years ago, decompression sickness in free diving was extremely rarely. And now it looks like every year someone publicly say that they have a decompression sickness. So for example,
Yeah.
recently the friend of mine, like Ukrainian national champion Andrew, he has a decompression sickness, and before that Michael have a decompression sickness. So it looks like the more free divers we have, the more it's going to be, I mean, the more deep free divers we have, the more it's maybe going to be an issue?
Well, it's an occurrence, and freediving is growing so much, the limits are being pushed a lot, and that yeah, it's a potential incident that can happen. So it's becoming more relevant. So I agree with you.
Okay, Jani, thank you very much for being with us, for sharing your knowledge. Highly appreciate it, and hopefully to see you again soon and talk about next interesting topic, which is decompression sickness.
Hey, thank you so much, man, and I hope we can meet sometime and go diving. Okay.
100%, 100%, no doubt.
Awesome. Thank you. Cheers. I'll see you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Okay guys, hopefully you enjoyed this interview. This was actually not the first interview, it was a second interview. Unfortunately, the first interview was has a really bad sound, so we deleted, and this was our second attempt. So if it was interesting for you, feel free to write down in comments what maybe you want to ask from Jani on my next interview. Our next interview is going to be about decompression sickness. So if you have some specific questions about decompression sickness in freediving, feel free to write down in comments. Once again, if you like this video, don't forget to click the like button, and I will see you next time.